No matter who the next head coach of the Jets is, there's one task for that person that's more important than anything else. Let's talk about what that task is today on Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Wednesday, January 8th, 2024, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. Thank you so much for making the show your first listener, first watch every day. Big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. This year, you can get a big return on FanDuel because new customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets if you win or lose your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, today we have our weekly mailbag show. Each Wednesday, we try and do a mailbag with listener questions. Thanks so much to everybody who sent in your questions. Let's begin. Our first question of the day. John, I have never seen as many active players and staff take shots so publicly at an owner. This team needs to restore some sort of credibility. What fundamental changes does this franchise need to make to create a sustainable winning culture? I think in that question, the money phrase is sustainable winning culture, because I think it's clear right now that there are a lot of issues with this franchise, but culture is at the top of the list of problems. And it starts with the owner. You know, I mean, it's kind of unbelievable how out in the open this is. You know, as the question mentioned, you know, there are some pretty open shots being taken. I mean, Aaron Rodgers, you know, it's kind of flown under the radar, but Aaron Rodgers has been very vocally critical of the job Woody Johnson's done for weeks. And, you know, you've seen it, you see it in so many places. DJ Reed, you know, after the Buffalo game, you know, essentially said he can't wait to get out of here. It's ugly right now for the New York Jets. And, you know, I actually think if you caught Woody Johnson's post-game comments Sunday after the Jets beat the Dolphins week 18, you heard what's kind of a microcosm of the problem. Woody Johnson essentially was asked if the team was disappointing, and I'm paraphrasing here, and his answer was, well, yeah, we fell short, but we were in 5 primetime games this year, so obviously the networks thought we were going to be good. And the way I interpreted that was Woody saying, well, the team wasn't good, but everybody thought we'd be good. We were on TV, we were on national TV 5 times, so you know the networks thought we'd be good. So if everybody thought we'd be good, how can you blame us? How can you blame me? Everybody thought we'd be good. And that in many ways, I think, is the microcosm of the problem, because Woody is so obsessed with perception. He's so obsessed with like what the national media thinks. And at the end of the day, the national media is very fair weather friends. You know, they'll praise you if you make bold, splashy moves during the offseason in March, because that's good content for them. But if you don't win when the season happens, you know, they're not going to praise you. And praise from the national media doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean you've done well. Every year, the national media proclaims some team the winner of the offseason. And half the time, that team's no good when the regular season comes. Half the moves that got praised during the offseason end up not panning out. And I think there's a simple reason for that. It's not easy to win in the NFL. There's 53 players on a roster, opposed to, say, 12 in the NBA, 25 and 26 in Major League Baseball, 20 in the NHL. At any given time, a team has 22 starters, 11 offense, 11 defense, versus, you know, 10 starters in baseball, if you count the pitcher and the DH. I know there's a 5-man rotation. 5 starters in basketball, 6 starters in hockey. So all of this means that, like, one person makes far less of an impact in football than any other sport. And that's even the quarterback. The guy who makes the most impact in football, the quarterback, he still makes far less of an impact than the most important position player in any other sport. And this means that, like football, you have to build depth more than any other spot. You have to have quality role-playing starters. You have to have quality, you know, bench guys. And these are not the things that really draw attention. These aren't the things that get the national media's attention. You know, the things that win in football are not really the splashy moves. It's player development. It's, you know, valuing a 5th-round draft pick and drafting a guy who turns into a good backup for you. Those are the things, you know, building your offensive line. These are the things that don't generate a lot of headlines, but they're the thing, managing your salary cap. These, you know, you don't really hear about these things, but these are the things the good franchises do. And they aren't the things the Jets focus on. The Jets focus on buzz. The Jets focus on how many times are we on national TV? Well, if we're on national TV this much, it must mean we're doing something right. And I think that there's just a lack of professionalism from top to bottom in this organization. And it manifests itself in ways that, aren't always something that impact the team on the field. But I get the feeling even from ownership, there's just this real classlessness right now to the Jets organization. There's some of the stories that have come out where, Woody Johnson yelled at Mike White after a game in Seattle 2 years ago, "You expletive. And that's just incredibly unprofessional thing, an incredibly unprofessional thing for an owner to say to a player. And in the story, it was mentioned that Woody actually was forced to apologize to Mike White after that. I think about what Woody Johnson said in public last year about Zach Wilson, when Woody Johnson essentially blamed Zach Wilson for the entire season going sideways. And people say, well, that's what fans say. So it's great that Woody sounds like a fan. How can you get mad at him? You can get mad at him because he's not a fan. He's supposed to be the guy in charge. And I think in almost every business, the behavior that's acceptable from a customer is very different from the behavior that's acceptable from your CEO. The CEO is responsible for their employees. And I know people defend this stuff because Zach Wilson's not a good player. Well, it doesn't matter if you're a good player or not. I think that you're entitled to a certain amount of respect from your employer. Yeah, they don't have to, they can bench you. They can, cut you. They can trade you. That's part of the business. But what's not part of the business is your employer, like, essentially blaming you for everything that went wrong with the team in public and publicly throwing you under the bus. I think that's very unprofessional. Another story that came out was after Jeff Ulbrich won his first game on Halloween, Aaron Rodgers wanted to give him the game ball. And again, like, people defend this stuff. People act like it's justified because Jeff Ulbrich's, not a good coach or not a good head coach. And the story came that Woody Johnson let his teenage son grab the ball and give the game ball to Garrett Wilson with a tirade that included curse words. And I blame Woody Johnson for that because, Woody Johnson should have stepped in and told his son, you can't do that. Listen, Jeff Ulbrich doesn't have to be a good coach to deserve to be treated with respect. That's how I feel. The guy wasn't very good at his job, but he was trying hard. He tried to represent the organization with class, and he was thrown into a really tough spot. In the biggest moment of his career, when Aaron Rodgers was trying to do something to signify it, Woody Johnson allowed that moment to be ruined. I think that's just classless. And I think that permeates, and it shows a lack of professionalism that permeates the entire organization. So what do I think needs to happen? Well, I think whoever the new coach is needs to step in and reinstill professionalism and make it clear that we're about winning now. We're not about the back pages. We're not about the cable, the ESPN and NFL network, praise. We're not about winning WFAN. We're not even about winning Locked On Jets. We're about winning games. We're about taking the steady steps that are necessary to win games. We're going to professionalize this. And that's, that's why I kind of I've been leaning towards Vrabel this whole time, because I think he's like the one guy that can come in who actually has the track record, who might be able to come in and instill some professionalism. Because what the Jets really need is they need somebody like Bill Parcells in 1997, when this organization was adrift, who stepped in and said, there are standards now in this organization. And they need to explain this to the ownership. If you want to build a winning team, this stuff can't happen. And that's what Bill Parcells. Now, I think the Jets were a mess on the field in 97. Or prior to 97. I don't think that they were as mess organizationally wide as they are right now, but this is what needs to happen. And until this stuff changes, I think you're going to keep seeing the same results. I keep seeing people say, well, these excuses that are made for Woody Johnson. Well, Woody Johnson gets too much hate. His biggest mistake is that he just hires the wrong people as their coach and his coach and general manager. Well, that's the most important part of his job. Again, now I can criticize Zach Wilson because I'm not the owner. I'm a member of the media. Saying that Woody Johnson would be good if he could only choose a better coach and GM, that's like saying you can't criticize Zach Wilson's performance because if he threw a more accurate ball, he'd be a better quarterback. You can't praise a guy for a hypothetical thing that he hasn't done well. If Woody Johnson starts choosing better people, he'll get praise. But he's been awful at his job in every way. And he set a losing atmosphere for this organization. And on top of it, I just think there's a lack of professionalism that's permeated because of Woody that in some ways doesn't impact the team, but it's a microcosm of bigger issues with the way the team doesn't function. And I hope that whoever the new person is comes in and straightens that out. Now, head here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll talk about who that new person might be. We have a lot of candidates right here. I think it's a very, very thorough search. But could there be more candidates? I have a candidate who I think the Jets should look into, who they haven't spoken with yet. I'll tell you who that is as we continue here on this Wednesday mailbag edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. Well, the Jets season's done, and I get why people don't want to bet against the Jets. It becomes really awkward because if you want to put some money down on Sunday, but you don't want to bet against your team, but your team can't win. It's just a tough situation. Well, you don't have to worry about that anymore because the playoffs are here. Unfortunately, the Jets aren't part of it. Again, FanDuel is the place to get in on the action because you get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed, win or lose. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listener, first watch every day. Big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. Let's continue now with our weekly mailbag. Our next question, John, is there anyone on the Jets list of GM or head coaches candidates that you would like to see the team interview as well? Personally, I would love to see the Jets interview Ray Agnew, John Spytek, Liam Cohn, and Todd Monken. What are your thoughts? Yeah, and the Jets have had a pretty extensive list right now. They've been pretty thorough on this search. They've reached out to a lot of people, but at the time I'm recording this podcast, the Jets have not reached out to Baltimore Ravens offensive coordinator Todd Monken. And one of the things I think I've been clear about through this process, at this moment, my number one choice is Ben Johnson, the Lions offensive coordinator. And doesn't sound like the Jets are going to interview him. There was a report on Monday that the Jets didn't even reach out because they know Johnson's not interested in the job. Johnson's been very clear that he's going to be picky about jobs. He probably could have been a head coach last year if he wanted to be, but he just decided he wanted to go back to Detroit. And I don't think he's waited all this time to be this picky to choose to enter this Jet situation. Now, again, of course, the Jets, being what they are and being what, as we discussed in the first segment, being so concerned with optics, on Tuesday leaked a story that, they're skeptical that Ben Johnson's going to be the right head coach for them because the Jets just can't let anything go. The Jets are obsessed. This is this type of stuff that has to end. Jets leaking some story that we don't really want Ben Johnson. The old, you can't fire me, I quit. Anyway, end of rant. Ben Johnson's my number one choice. I think he's going to be a really good head coach in the league based on what I've heard about him and what I've seen and the job he's done in Detroit. My number two choice is Vrabel for reasons I've mentioned. I think he might be the one guy that can go in and tell Woody Johnson, if you want to win, you can't do things this way. This is how you got to do it. But if the Jets don't get Vrabel and, it seems like things might be moving in a direction where the Patriots are going to end up with him, my number three choice would be Todd Monken, who is the Baltimore Ravens offensive coordinator, who's a guy who may be a familiar name because 5 years ago in 2019, it was 6 years ago now, where the time sure flies. 6 years ago, back in 2019, Monken almost got the job. Monken was at that point the offensive coordinator of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and he was a finalist. It came down to Matt Rule, Adam Gase, and Todd Monken, and the Jets chose Adam Gase. Here, I think there's a lot to like about Monken. Is the first thing that comes to mind about him is he's done literally everything you can do and succeeded in every role imaginable except NFL head coach. He's been a successful offensive coordinator in Baltimore. Innovative offensive mind, and that's an expression that gets used too frequently. Great play caller, great play designer, helped the Georgia Bulldogs win 2 national championships at the college level, so he can work with young players, develop them. Actually had a stint as the head coach in college of the University of Southern Mississippi and turned that program from a 0-win team into a 9-4 team in the span of 3 years. Really, and did a good job there. Now, normally I don't think there's a ton of transferability from coaching in college to coaching in the pros. And I think that there are two very different games, but it's different for a guy like Monken because part of the challenge for college coaches is that you have to address and relate to pro players differently. Pro players are professionals. You can't really get on them as much. You can't yell at them as much. You need to be more collaborative with them, and that's the issue a lot of college coaches run into. Monken's worked with pros, so he knows them and he understands the pro schedule. That's another issue, is that the schedule for a typical week in college is different from the pros. Monken's used to the pros, but because he ran the University of Southern Mississippi, he at least has some experience being the guy, being the person in charge, being the person who supervises coaches, who oversees the game plans. He's done pretty much everything except being an NFL head coach. He's been very successful, and I think that in many cases the coordinator gets way too much credit for the team's success and way too much blame for the team's failures. And that's especially true of offensive coordinators when we talk about how their quarterbacks play. But I think that it's clear that there's a tangible difference Monken has made in the career of Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson's abilities as a thrower have really elevated the last 2 seasons. And I think Monken has to get a lot of credit for that. So if I can't get Ben Johnson, which I can't, and it's not because the Jets don't think he's going to be a good coach. I don't care what the Jets put out there. And I can't get Vrabel, which I was more optimistic about before the Patriots fired Gerard Mayo. I actually, when Sunday began, I was kind of thinking the Jets were going to end up with Vrabel. And then it came down to would the Patriots fire Mayo, and they did. I'd like to see Todd Monken be the coach. Now, the Jets haven't reached out to him, though, so I don't know what's going on there, but that would be my preferred choice if you can't get those top 2 guys. Our next question. Out of the 17 candidates the Jets are interviewing for a head coach, who would you say is the best? And I've already given you my answers on that. I think the question was phrased somewhat jokingly because it says of the 17 candidates. So the only point I want to make about this is I like the fact the Jets are casting a wide net. And I had a lot of issues with the way Mike Tannenbaum ran the team during his tenure as general manager, especially those last 2 years, because those last 2 years were a disaster. And that was kind of the beginning of this downslide that we're still in the middle of 14 years later. And it's those last 2 years were as bad as anything any Jets GM has ever done. But Mike Tannenbaum did do some good during his tenure with the Jets. And I think back to the 2009 coaching search that he ran, and he cast a very wide net that year. I thought the Jets were very thorough in that search. I think that they interviewed a lot of interesting candidates, including some that were outside the box, including a coach at Stanford who had only been there 2 years and only won 9 games in 2 years. It was Jim Harbaugh. And yeah, looking back, I think the Jets wish they had hired Jim Harbaugh, and he would have been a better choice than Rex Ryan. But that search did end with the Jets hiring Rex Ryan. And while I don't think Rex Ryan should even be a candidate right now for this job in 2024, I think for the situation the Jets were in 2009, Rex Ryan brought a lot of very positive attributes. And in many ways, he was a good coach for that team. And while Rex Ryan did not ultimately prove to be the long-term solution at head coach, I don't think you could say Tannenbaum made a horrible choice by bringing in Rex, considering what he did with that team the first 2 years. So I know that there's some consternation about like all the coaches the Jets are bringing in, but I, at this point, am looking at it from a glasses half full perspective and saying that I think this is a sign that the Jets are being thorough, that they're doing their diligence. And that's something for, again, there is a lot I can criticize Mike Tannenbaum for during his tenure here, but I think there were many instances where he showed due diligence and it benefited the Jets. So I'm not going to, I think it's good. Again, I'd like to see them expand the search. I'd like to see them, go check out what Todd Monken's up to. I think that would be good for them. Now, head here on the Locked On Jets podcast, let's talk about hope. A lot of Jets fans feeling kind of hopeless right now. Is there some sort of silver lining? Is there a bright spot on the horizon? It's not entirely clear, and I'll tell you why that is and what we might do about it as we continue here on this Wednesday mailbag edition of Locked On Jets. So this episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Prize Picks. It's playoff time. If you're like me, you want to make the most of these final weeks of football action. Well, that's where Prize Picks comes in. If you love football and want a chance to win real money while watching the games, Prize Picks is the place for you. It's the best way to turn your sports opinions into cash with daily fantasy player projections. With Prize Picks, you simply pick more or less on player stats like total passing yards or rushing touchdowns and a shot to win up to 1,000 times your money. You can make your picks in less than 60 seconds, and whether you're looking for a flex play to boost your payout or want to cash out quickly, Prize Picks has you covered. And with over 10 million members and billions in winnings, it's clear that people are loving this platform. And here's a special offer for Locked On NFL listeners. Download the app today and use code Locked On NFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Prize Picks. Run your game again. Download the app today. Use code Locked On NFL. It's one word with no space. LOCKEDON NFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is also brought to you by Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? Rocket Money makes it easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps you lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. I mean, I'm the worst at this. I sign up for subscriptions and forget about them. I waste so much money. Rocket Money is what you should use if you're like me. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Wednesday, doing our weekly mailbag show. Our next question is from Jimmy on the East Side. John, I've been a Jets fan my whole life. I remember watching my first game in 1974 with Joe Namath as quarterback. I'm sad to say this, but this moment is about as low as I can remember as a fan of this team. I did go to the game on Sunday on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being super optimistic and 1 being the 2017 Browns. Where are you? I'd say I'm about a 2.5, and I'm hoping you can help improve my outlook. And Jimmy, let me just say, great. You're a great fan for going to the game Sunday. And I'm happy the team was able to bring home a win for you, because, sitting through that in such a lost season and still supporting your team. I mean, you're the type of fan this team doesn't deserve. Your loyalty is just through the roof. And I know a lot of you are like that. You guys are just, the Jets have the best fan base in the NFL. My optimism right now is not high. I think there are a couple of things contributing to this, Jimmy. I think, first of all, you just had a season where the team went all in. So it's not like, there are years where even when we know like they didn't eventually build to something, it felt like we were trying to build to something. We were in rebuilding mode. It felt like we were trying to move forward. And even if the team wasn't very good, you could look to the future. Whereas this year was an all-in year. I think another aspect of this is just how badly it went. It's not like we got to December and we're in the middle of the playoff race, and even though you knew the team was underachieving, you still felt like there was something that could happen if we got hot at the right time. This team was out of it by October. I think another aspect of this is the owner, and I think that this 2-year stretch between 2023 and now, it's kind of like ended all the debate about Woody Johnson, because like prior to 2023. You could have made a case. Maybe it's not all Woody's fault. Maybe he's not that bad. I mean, I gotta be honest with you. Like, even like 2 years ago, I wasn't like this critical of Woody Johnson. Like, he's gotten worse. And you can fire a bad coach. You can fire a bad GM. You can trade and cut bad players. You can draft better guys. The one thing you can't do as a sports fan is get rid of a bad owner. And, unless they sell the team, or unless there's some condition there that forces them to sell the team, there's not a lot you can do. And I think these are kind of the key elements as to why optimism is so low. I think 2.5 is about right now. That optimism level could be higher a couple of weeks from now if the Jets make what I think are compelling hires for general manager and head coach. If you're looking for optimism, though, I mean, what I can tell you is that sometimes the situation seems hopeless and the team just turns it around out of nowhere when nobody's expecting it. There are plenty of examples through sports. I mean, I think the example everybody's kind of gravitated to right now is another team in the city, the New York Knicks, who have had just similar awful ownership for longer than 2 decades. And suddenly that owner hires the right people, and suddenly that owner just like stops being erratic. And now the Knicks are like in pretty good shape. Weird things happen. The Giants in the late 1970s were just as much of a disaster as the Jets are today, or the Giants are now. And the commissioner stepped in and forced them to hire George Young. George Young hired a coach named Ray Perkins, and Ray Perkins hired a defensive coordinator named Bill Parcells. And then a couple of years later, Ray Perkins left the Giants to go take the head coaching job at the University of Alabama. Parcells was elevated. Giants went on to win 2 Super Bowls in a very short span. You could go back. I mean, this one might not be a great example because it's so painful for Jets fans, but I mean, 2001, the Patriots were coming off a couple of bad seasons, and they lost their second game. Their starting quarterback got knocked out. Tom Brady came in. That was a point where things seemed very low for New England. And I know I'm probably not making people feel better by mentioning all these moments that things turned around for rivals, but the point is, like, the future is not set in stone. The past is set in stone, but teams can turn it around. I mean, the first, up until the 1970s, the Pittsburgh Steelers were the most inept organization in sports, and that was true through their entire history. They couldn't put a decent team together to save their lives. Since the 1970s, they've turned it around. So we'll see how well this hiring process goes, but it can turn around. I don't know when it will. I feel like I've been saying that through the entire existence of this podcast going back to 2016. I feel like I don't want to like give people false hope because there's no guarantee it's going to turn around, but it can turn around, and sometimes inexplicable things happen. So just have to hope that that's the case. Our last question is from Taylor. John, out of the coaching candidates the Jets have been considering, are there any that you see as a potential Adam Gase level misfire? Well, I hate to give this answer because first of all, it's going to upset people. And second of all, the guy's, got a good track record in the organization, a special place in the team's history. But I mean, I think it has to be Rex, where, you have a coach who is coming off 6 straight losing seasons when he did coach and hasn't coached in 8 years. I mean, I hate to say this because, I do have very fond memories of those first 2 years with Rex, but I think it's ridiculous that the Jets even spent time interviewing him. Like, you want to honor Rex, give him like a Rex Ryan day and let him speak at halftime of a game. Honor his contributions to the franchise that way. Don't give him an interview for head coach. I mean, the other, I mean, just think back to the Rex era. Like, he could never build an offense. He could never develop a quarterback. The teams were frequently very undisciplined. It's like all the stuff that needs to be cleaned up. That's what those Rex teams did the last 4 years he was here, and then the 2 years in Buffalo. So, I mean, I don't want to compare Rex to Adam Gase because Rex has a good spot in franchise history and Adam Gase does not. But that's like a higher where it would be so illogical to me that like I can't even foresee a scenario where it could pan out. I mean, there are candidates I don't really like in this search. Matt Nagy's one of them from the Kansas City Chiefs. Cliff Kingsbury's another. Arthur Smith from Pittsburgh, the offensive coordinator there. These are guys who are like retread coaches who were pretty unremarkable the first time around. But I can at least like, if they Jets hire them, then I can at least like foresee an outside chance so that like maybe things click the second time around for them. I don't really think the Jets bringing back Rex would remind me of the Raiders bringing back Art Shell in 2006. Art Shell was a coach of the Raiders in the late 80s and early 90s and had some winning seasons there, but also had a lot of flaws. And the Raiders fired him in the mid 90s. And then he spent a couple of years as Atlanta's offensive line coach. And then he was like, I think he was out of coaching for like 6 years. Then in 2006, the Raiders randomly brought him back and he was awful that year. And the team went 2-14. I mean, that's like the scenario I would see playing out if the Jets brought Rex Ryan back. Again, like you can honor Rex Ryan without rehiring him as head coach. That's like it's nothing wrong. 15th anniversary of the 2010 team is next year. Have a nice day for them. Show your appreciation to Rex and give him a suite at MetLife Stadium. Let him come to training camp and speak to the team about about Jets history. He knows a lot about Jets history. Not only was he the head coach for 6 years, 2 of which were successful. He's the son of the defensive coordinator of the Super Bowl III team. His father, Buddy Ryan, ran the defense for the Namath team that won the Super Bowl. So honor him that way. Don't honor him, but don't like celebrate his existence by bringing him back. I don't get it. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. Helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Enjoy your Wednesday, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow to talk more Jets.